Reimagining Success, episode 387. And in this week's episode, I'm talking to Jake Wysocki, a design thinking strategist turned workshop builder based in Wisconsin, about what it actually looks like to live and work intentionally, not just as a philosophy, but as a daily practice. This one is for you if you've been curious about the FIRE movement, which I haven't really talked about before. If you're building a business and want to stop throwing spaghetti at the wall, or if you're ready to have more honest conversations with yourself and with your partner about what you actually want your life to look like. Welcome to Reimagining Success, the podcast that helps you build a profitable business as an independent expert, one that works for you and your lifestyle. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg, former corporate insider turned business mentor, executive coach, and mum of two. Whether you're a solopreneur, a coach, speaker, consultant, I'm here to guide you in creating a business that gives you freedom, flexibility, and the fulfillment you're looking for. Ready to redefine success and build a business that you love? Let's get started. Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to this month's interview. And I'm here with Jake Wysocki and he is in Wisconsin in America. So I will put you straight on the spot, Jake, and ask you the million-dollar question, which is, what does success mean to you?
All right. So I got lots of thoughts on success, but maybe I'll start with what it used to mean to me only a few years ago when I left, before I left corporate. And that was basically just like, get the work done, put it out there, just do what you promised. Nothing can change. Just get the work done. But now for me, success can mean a lot of different things. So I've quit my job and now I'm an entrepreneur. And that means for my business that I'm profitable and things like that. And I'm serving my customers to the best of my ability. And I have like other tangents we can go on later. But the other thing with success is really just living, the way that I want to live. There's a whole FIRE community backstory that we can get into later as well. But that's been part of my journey, is how do I actually live the life that I want to live and my wife and I want to live with our family.
And I definitely want to park the wife thing, but I'm super curious about that piece. I know you've shared some exercises you do together, so let's make sure we come back to that. But starting
Absolutely.
with you, what has been your process of rewriting those scripts of just get the job done, to, hey, identifying as an entrepreneur? And I love that you emphasize that, yes, we need to be profitable and actually be selling, because otherwise it's not a successful business, right? But also these other things. So what's been that journey for you?
Yeah. So a few things that come to mind. So my company's name is Intentioncraft, and that kind of hits at the core of, my kind of philosophy, which is think about what you're trying to do and why, so that you have the best chance of succeeding. And a lot of times the why are we doing this seems obvious to people, unless you stop and actually think about it and you realize the actual why of something is often different than we assume. So let me try to give an example. It's like, I don't know, a common example is why do we work, or something just in general, like why do we work? It's like, well, because everybody works. Like that's just what people do. But if you pause and think, you can find lots of examples, again, like from the FIRE community, for example, which is financial independence, retire early. I don't know how big that is over where you're at, but in the US,
my world, I'm familiar with it, but I don't think it's super mainstream. And I'm sure it's bigger in the US.
Yeah, I think so. And like some of the laws and stuff. So just for anyone listening who's like, I don't know what this guy is talking about, it's financial independence, retire early. And it's basically the concept of you save enough. There's multiple ways to do it, but it's basically you have enough money that you can live without having to work. And it gives you freedom. It's not so much about the retire early. It's more about the freedom that it gives you. And so I forgot where we started on this journey, but I'll keep going for a second. You can tell me if I didn't answer your question. But for me, it's all about taking a step back and actually thinking about, what am I doing this for? And a lot of people just think, well, I need more. I need to buy that house. I need to go on those vacations. I need to do all these things. But if you stop and think, why do I want those things? They might be important to you still. You might decide, oh yeah, I do want that house for XYZ reason. But then you might realize, well, we need a house for these reasons, so we don't need that house we were looking at. We can scale down, and that gives us more freedom, for example. And basically, the point is, take a step back, consider, especially those big things that really are the big rocks, so to speak, that fill up your bucket, like, the big rocks and then the gravel and then the sand analogy. Or if you put the sand in first, you can't put the big rocks in. Think about what those big rocks are and really think about those. You don't have to analyze every decision, but it's thinking about those big decisions and really getting clear on those, and it makes everything else easier in life.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And as you know, I think we connected because of the intentionality crossover. It's such an important piece for me too. I think so much of how we live, because we're so busy and life is so lifing around us all the time. It's just, okay, head down, autopilot, conveyor belt, you do the thing. And at school, I'm writing this in my Substack at the moment, the whole, go to school, get the grades, go to another school, go to another school, whatever, go to the job and promotion. And it's the ladder. And then in our personal lives as well, it's like, okay, meet that person, have the children, I guess the wedding first, ideally, and then the house and the more. It's really just, why are we doing it? And actually, it's a little bit of the emperor's new clothes myth, right? That thinking like, hang on a second. And I love how you then begin to question. So again, in your story, what was it? Was there a trigger, or was it just kind of a gradual murmuring awakening that happened?
That's a really good question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. So let me just think for a second. I remember, so maybe for me, the most, I don't know, I like to pretend I'm really good with big words. So I'll try here. The most salient moment for me was when I've always been, all right, so let me back up actually. In college, I think it started in college. So one of my first jobs, which was actually high school and college, was working with children at a place in Florida, in Gainesville, Florida, where I was like a counselor, like a after school counselor, and I was a bus driver actually, and all these other things with kids. And at one point, I became a supervisor, which is kind of crazy actually. Now that I think about it, having children of my own now, like I was probably 21, and like in charge of a building of many people, including many children. But in any case, part of that supervisor training, the owners were really big on actually Jim Collins' first book, Good to Great, in the hedgehog concept. And I remember they introduced me to books like this, and this is where my story is going. But they talked about their hedgehog concept was training. And I was like, that's interesting. And so they were really big on training. And part of the training was like introspection, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I actually just reread recently and still holds up. I think it's a really great book.
Oh, I agree. It's such a classic, isn't it? But it's not dusty at all. It's so relevant. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, real quick tangent on that. I was looking at some Goodreads comments, and some people are like, this is like garbage and blah, 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 and like synergize. And it's like, you clearly didn't actually read the book, because they are truly principles. And yes, it is a little bit self-helpy, but it is really useful. If you actually think about it, it's super useful. So that's where like that spark of being thoughtful and doing, like he gave, the owner had given us like goal packets to complete and stuff, which is like, what's your ideal day look like? Imagine 20 years, things like that. And I really enjoyed that. And so I think that was the seed. And then it sprouted into like one of the big decisions that I really leveraged this thinking was right after my wife and I got married in the year 2015. We quit our jobs and we traveled for a year. And I remember thinking about like, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to go off like that track that you were kind of talking about, like the paved path, go get a job, go work and climb the corporate ladder, and then you're going to sail off into the sunset when you're 70 and you can like go to Jamaica or whatever for vacation. Which, if that's what you want to do, I'm not knocking it, but I also think you should do it intentionally. So anyway, we could talk about that too, but that was really a conversation with my wife and I, and we kind of stepped back and we said, what do we want to do? We just got married in 2014. We hadn't really traveled much. And we were living in San Francisco at the time, which is really expensive. So we were saving up theoretically to buy a house, and we had some money. We're like, do we want to buy a house here? Like, do we really want to do that? Like, what does that look like? And we kind of projected a little bit, some like, looked at the financials and looked at kind of what we want our life to be like. And then we looked at, well, what if we just traveled instead? What would that look like? And we kind of looked at those two options, and we almost chickened out. Honestly, I told my work at the time that I was going to be leaving or intended to leave. And like, well, what if we give you 6 weeks vacation, which was like for the US, for a relatively new employee, we had like 2 weeks. And I was like, wow, 6 weeks. We almost did it. But the question we asked ourselves was, would we regret not doing this the way that we kind of envisioned in the first place? And we decided, yes, we would. Let's just take the leap. And so there's a lot we could pull there, but that's kind of the manifestation of like the first real big moment. And then that kind of has carried through, that thinking has carried through for us.
It mirrors my story, although individually for me. And you remind me that I did a 7 Habits training. It was like a 3-day training. And I think at that, I now am reminded, I think my grandmother died around the same time. And we went round the room saying, why are you here? And we were all like, to find the meaning of life and to live in the moment. And then this one guy was like, I just want to be a better leader, like, which is fair enough, right? It's like the 7 habits of a highly effective leader. And all of us were like, oh, we're going to find ourselves. And so on. He was like, I just want to be better at my job. So it was interesting. I guess you have to be receptive to it. And that's the lens you bring. I just ran a workshop, and I know you do a lot in workshops last week. And it was, some people came and I just want to, scale my business. And someone else is like, oh no, I'm having this big pivotal philosophical moment in my life. And it's just the energy and the moment that you bring. And then, as I said, I also traveled. In fact, I took a sabbatical initially, but halfway through that I left, because I felt if I came back to my very comfortable life, a bit like your 6 weeks, it would have been 12 weeks for me, but still nothing would have changed. And in fact, that I am more, because I've been out, and similar to you, I left in 2013. So again, quite a similar sort of moment of awakening, I guess. But what I've realized is, certainly it's not about leaving the job. And most importantly, you carry those scripts with you, right? I was just talking to a friend and a colleague on her podcast the other day, and she was saying, I wasn't even receptive to your message, i.e. my message, because I was like, well, that's not for me. I'm building this thing and I'm building this empire, and I don't want a lifestyle business. Like, that's not good enough for me in a way, right? Which is a bit insulting to me. It's like, okay, it's good enough for me, but not for you. But she has come around through 2 bouts of burnout to realizing, hang on a second, all those shoulds, all of that, like, why? Exactly your earlier point, right? Why? Because I've got, no, but hang on, why do you have to? And where are those shoulds coming from? So it's so much more, mindset we talk about, but it's those really deeply ingrained scripts. So has that been something in terms of kind of the more mental process there? Have you found, when working for yourself as well, is it easy to get caught up in those old corporate scripts, even though on paper you're doing this for freedom?
Yeah, so it definitely is. And I'll give you a few examples. The first thing I want to mention, though, is you were talking about should, and I'll just share a phrase that you might have heard, but one of my favorites around this topic is don't should all over yourself.
Yes.
So I'm sure you've heard that. But that always comes to mind when people talk about shoulds. And I love little sort of quippy phrases, or just phrases that stick out like that, because it really kind of draws attention to like the problem. Just a random aside, another one I love for when I'm conducting research or doing a workshop with somebody is put your brain on speakerphone. And that usually gets people to sit up.
I like it. I've not had that one. I'll make a note of that one.
Yeah. So there's one for free. You guys can have that and use it. It's really easy, and it's like a lightning bolt. People are like, oh, I love that, and then it just helps them remember to do things. So this is almost a meta commentary, actually, unintended, of like scripts and stuff, like mini scripts almost that you can install in people. But so for scripts for like work, so it is interesting. So let me, I'll share a little bit about what's going on in my household right now. So my wife is supporting us on the day-to-day. So because of fire, we don't really need to worry too much about the future. Fingers crossed. There's a lot of caveats there that we don't need to get into right now. But we have quite a bit saved up for our like nest egg, if you will, and it should grow, hopefully to be very good for us in the future. So we really just need to worry about the now. And my wife's work can support us for now. And that's what enables me to do what I do without stressing and things like that, which has really helped prevent a lot of the what I'll call it almost fight or flight mentality of like corporate, like, well, I need to do it or I'm going to get fired kind of thing, like for my work, if I was working in corporate. But the sort of fundamental challenge we're having right now is she is, we'll say, skeptical about how much she likes her job. I'm treading a little bit lightly right now. There's been some changes recently in the last month, and we've been having a lot of discussion like, okay, well, how long do you stick this out? Well, do we really need you to work? And so we're at this point where it is time to examine those scripts, because it's like, well, I'll just keep going. And we're going to stay the course. And we said we do this for a few years until your business really takes off. And then we'll figure out the next step. And it's like, well, now this new variable is in the mix. And so we are having to re-examine our scripts right now. And the way that we're doing that is we're looking at some of the, I'll put a pin in design thinking in a second, because this ties in with design thinking. But I love mixing intuition and like logic. There's probably like the Greek, probably ethos and logos or something like that. But I love mixing like intuition. Like intuitively, it feels like, well, if you really are unhappy, we should find a way to get you out now. But also, what does that actually mean for our life? So we're looking at it from both perspectives. So the intuition says, get out now, the building is on fire, so to speak. But also it's like, okay, well, is that really what we want to do? What are the options? Let's look at it from like a numbers perspective and really understand. And so we're in the middle of that right now. And that's how we kind of examine our scripts sometimes, is when we notice something's wrong, then we stop and we actually analyze and think about it and discuss it.
And it's such an important realization for people who may be early in the journey that it's not just that one decision, right? Because things change. And right now, an assumption is, okay, one partner has the well-paid job and this other person is more free to imagine and dream and maybe build something for the future. Oh, but hang on, actually, that person is not so enamored in the job, or the manager has left, or they're made redundant. Suddenly that shakes the ground and you have to sort of rethink again, right? So it's not just a one and done. And that's what I love about your approach to have, and it seems so obvious that you should do it with your partner, because, you know, of course, you're never making these decisions in isolation. You have a house, you have children. It's not, you know, I made my decision very much in isolation, in a vacuum. I had, you know, a cheap flat that I was renting, I could give up right away. I had cats at the time that I got rid of, but apart from that, I had no real obligations, you know. And so I was so free and I could take all that risk, and I was hugely privileged to have a lot of savings, et cetera, right? So many things that make me different to someone who's listening to this. I've got 3 kids in private school, and I've got this big house, 6-bedroom house, and I've got the Range Rover and whatever. It's very different.
Yes.
But all the more powerful to then rethink those scripts, I suppose. But obviously you've only lived your reality, but perhaps when you talk to others, any insights to share from the experience of doing this together and how to do it as a team, rather than, I guess, the worst case, not worst case scenario, but a sort of not so nice scenario is if you're feeling resentful, I've got to stay in this job because my partner's off like just coaching and doing fun things, or vice versa. You know, I'm having to lean on my partner and I feel really guilty because I wish I could bring in more money and right now I can't, or you know, any tips from doing this together as a partnership?
Yeah, I got a bunch of thoughts on this, and I'll actually shout out, you've probably, and many of the listeners have probably heard of Ramit Sethi. He's big in like the personal finance. He has a great, if you're married and you have money fights or whatever you want to call it, his podcast is amazing. Like my wife and I get along really well and we're really dialed in on our money, but we still love listening to the show. And people like you're describing right now are on that show all the time. But one of the things that when we're listening, we're like, why don't, the answer to your question, let me try to answer your question first, is I think shared goals and having a shared vision. And Ramit talks about this a lot, which is why I thought of him. But for my wife and I, we are playing together on the same team. So here's a common example that I hear from just kind of the world in general, Ramit's show and stuff like this is, well, I'm making money and I want to spend it the way I want to spend it. And I'm responsible for this part of the bills. And my spouse can spend money on whatever they want. And if they don't make as much money as me, so they shouldn't spend as much money, like these kind of conversations. And I think I don't understand. It's hard for me to, I can empathize with it, but like, it's not the way I view the world, because I just see it. We got married. My personal view is we got married. We are now a team. So a dollar I make is your money and the dollar you make is my money. And our goal is to figure out, what do we want to do with it? And what do we want our life to work, to look like together? And so there's no resentment in our marriage, as far as I'm aware, at least. And when we talk about it, because I can't read minds, but as far as I can tell, I'm very confident to say that there is no resentment in our marriage, because we are working together towards a goal. And our goal, just side note, we can talk about this later too, if it's relevant, is to do another trip like we did, except now with our kids in the next 4 to 5 years. And we'd actually just start making it a little more concrete than fuzzy this like last month. So that goal then gives us it gives us a timeline. It gives us more concrete things to look forward to. And then we can start saying, okay, well, should we buy that thing, or are we going to need it in a few years? Do we actually want it? Or would we rather accelerate our plans to take this trip? Having a concrete thing we're starting to move towards makes everything more clear about what the trade-offs are in the day-to-day. So, and who's everybody's role and all these things. There's like, everything comes out of that, I think, a shared vision. So.
Love that. And how do you do that? Is it sort of a New Year's Eve kind of like setting our vision, sitting down with a big piece of paper? Like, how do you do it? Is it just organic throughout the year, or do you have specific milestones?
Yeah. So my wife and I do what we call State of the Unions. And so this is actually, so I've gone, just really briefly, I've gone through 2 pivots in my business. The first one was to help people do something like this. My wife and I had been doing, so I have a design thinking background, which is basically structured exercises mixed with like human-centered mindset, like thinking about the humans on the other end. That's my background in like a sentence. I've used those skills to design experiences for my wife and I to basically do our own workshop. And what we were talking about 7 habits of highly effective people earlier. And I call it the quadrant 2 space, if you will. So we really think about that quadrant 2, which is important but not urgent. And it's so hard to find time. So we actually schedule 3 times a year, about half a day to go do this like workshop between my wife and I that I just facilitated ourselves. It's kind of on rails at this point, but it starts with what I call the pillars exercise, which is more commonly known as the wheel of life, I believe. And it's basically like, look at your life in, it doesn't really matter, but eight categories, relationships and health and work and, whatever, things like that. And so, and I don't know how deep you want me to go on this process, but I can share a little bit about how this works. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we almost always start with kind of a check-in, like where are we at now? And the circle or the wheel of life is really good at analyzing how do we feel now. So the question we ask is, with all these categories, these 8 categories, we do this separately first. We say, how satisfied are we on an A to F scale? Or we've done 1 to 10 in the past. Right now we're doing A to F because it feels kind of intuitive.
Doing a report card. Nice.
Exactly, a report card. And then we use that, and there's more to the process, but basically that's the main thing. And then we come together and we share and we discuss. And that kind of gives a sense of what are we thinking about, like what's important to us, and what might be an area to focus on because it might be going, the wrong way or not having enough attention.
And sorry, are you doing that together, sort of like one score each, or combined as a team? You're agreeing, or how do you do that?
Right. So we do it individually first. So we will go and rank ours or rate ours ourselves. We don't do a combined one, but that's a way to talk about, because we are together, we're a team, but we're also individuals first.
Nice.
And so individuals first, and then we figure out how we're working as a team and where we can support each other and things like that. So for example, if my wife were to do work right now, it would be a pretty low score, and mine would be pretty high because I have destiny or the ability to control my own destiny to a certain degree and things like that, and she does not. So anyway, so that's kind of the first step. And then it's not so much as like a big piece of paper and kind of like vision boarding, although you could. It's more, which area do we really want to look at? And so this year we've been talking about doing this big trip. Let's start making it real. And so we talked about I always start with the purpose. Let's be intentional. Let's start with the purpose. Why do we even want to take a trip like this? One, it could be fun. As we kind of talked about the whole thing, but what we landed on was, besides being fun, we want our girls to be able to feel confident walking into any room they enter. And that was what we ended up landing on, which is kind of counterintuitive. And it's debatable, which is the sign of a good purpose, by the way, is if someone can say, well, that's not why you would take a trip. Good. We have an opinion and other people have an opinion. That means it's a good purpose if people can disagree with you. So anyway, now that gives us a little bit of focus on how do we actually design that experience in the next few years to accomplish this thing that we want for our girls. So anyway, that's kind of how we think about it with a little bit of an example.
Nice. And sorry, did you say that's an annual process, or are you checking in sort of throughout the year?
So the check-in is 3 times a year. We were trying to do it every quarter, but life gets a little busy. So we decided let's instead of trying for 4 and landing on 3, let's just commit to 3 and land on 3, hopefully. So we're going to try that this year.
Okay. Yeah. And I think we said this off air before, but you have children who are 5 and 8 years old, right?
Yes, correct. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when did you imagine involving them in the process at some point? Because I'd love to do that. Like have them, like, let's have a family vision. Like, what kind of trips do we want to do together? And more walks in the forest or whatever.
Yes, 100%. We haven't yet. My 8-year-old certainly could for sure, and especially for like these trips that are coming on the horizon, we will definitely start including them more and more. And I want to do more things like, he talks about it in 7 Habits, actually, like a family mission statement almost. It could take different forms, but it's like, we're the kind of family who ... or some exercise like that I want to do in the next year, I think, with at least my 8-year-old and probably my 5-year-old. She'd probably get at least enough to participate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice and it's very empowering for them to feel involved, even if they're not actually making the big financial decisions, to feel like they have some kind of say in it, I think is hugely rewarding for them and gives them responsibility from an early age.
Yes, 100%.
Brandis, why can't we go to Disneyland? Or whatever it might be.
That's right. It's like, well, do you really want to go to Disneyland? Let's talk about what that means. And I'll talk to you a little bit about money, at least in some way, and share with you, like, this is how this thing works. I want to start peppering in how it works. I think people are so afraid. I'm a big Dr. Becky fan. Not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Becky. She's big in the US at least, but I think you would like her. I don't know if you've heard of the anxious generation either.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that, Jonathan Haidt? She's not, in any kind of partnership officially with him, but they're on the same wavelength in many ways, I would say. So if you like Jonathan Haidt, I think you'd like Dr. Becky, but she's big on good. And her book is good. She wrote a book called Good Inside, and her podcast is called Good Inside.
Okay.
And the concept is like all children are good. And like there's a whole, that's another rabbit hole. But where I was going with this was she basically advocates, in my words, she advocates for treating children like actual humans, not necessarily adults, but like they are people too. And they actually are more sophisticated than you think. And you can have more real conversations with them than many people, I think, would assume, especially the way like I grew up. I feel like back, whatever, when I was growing up, I think the mindset was, well, you're a kid, just do what you're told to a certain degree. And we're definitely raising our children to be more, like, I want you involved. I want to hear what you think. I want to bring you on this journey. I want to tell you things. If you're asking me something, you're old enough to hear at least some kind of reasonable answer to it, instead of, you're not ready for that. No, you're ready for that because you're asking. That kind of mindset.
Nice. Yeah,
so,
I'm with you. I do the same. I think my partner says I tend to be too sophisticated with my answers, but I figure I'd rather sort of be honest and talk about it, and then eventually they'll understand, rather than trying to lie or kind of simplify things. I don't love that. Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
Okay, and in terms of, I guess, from a business model perspective, not necessarily the details, but because you talked about FIRE and because people might not be so familiar with that, what does that mean in terms of, does it mean saving a certain amount and investing that? Does it mean that, planning to do nothing for the end of it? What talk us through sort of what that means concretely in terms of your financial and business decisions?
Yeah. Okay. So, and this is actually perfect timing. I have a lot of recommendations. I know this isn't, I don't want to give too much homework to all the readers out there or listeners out there, but if these are interesting to you, my favorite resource, which I'm actually restarted reading today, is called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. And that kind of lays out the probably primary thesis of FIRE, if you will. And the concept is usually rooted in simple index funds in the stock market that should likely grow at a certain rate, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into details there, but the concept is you're building an asset that will, spin off money or grow, that you can pull money out of that account such that it won't go down over time, but you'll have enough to live off of, if that makes sense. So 4% rule is the typical thing that people in the FIRE community reference. And that's whatever your amount of assets are, you can take 4% pretty safely, most likely, without it, drawing down to zero before you die, before you're done with life. And so that's kind of like the core concept of FIRE. So so a few things that I love about this. Instead of this concept that most people, I think, have in their minds, which is, I just need more. It's got to be like $10 million. I just need more. I got to keep working. What if? There is an actual number that you can create that is a reasonable stopping point to like wealth accumulation. And then you can, at that point, then you can make more decisions. And I'm rambling a little bit, so stop me if this is not coherent. But what I love about this journey is every step along the way, you gain more freedom. It's not you have to wait until you hit a certain number, but every step along the way, just like I'm in what's called Coast FIRE, I don't need to worry too much about saving for the future. I just need to pay for now. I'm not at like full FIRE where I still need an income to live the way I want to live. That's more freedom than I had, years ago, when I'm like, well, if I don't have a job, like I could live for a little while, have like a buffer, but like I need to figure something out. So that's kind of like the first thing is there's a number that you can hit, figure out what that number is. There's ways to calculate that. That's outside the scope of this conversation probably. But that gives you a target to hit. And then you can make decisions about how do we best get there? Do we take this trip now and slow down our journey to getting to that financial independence number? Or is it more worth doing this now? And I'll shout out another book that I don't know if you've heard of this one. This is a great companion to the whole FIRE conversation, which is called Die with Zero. Have you heard of this book?
No, I like the idea of it.
Die with Zero is an amazing book. The high level here is that if you like reach the end of your life and you have gobs of money, you have in many ways wasted your life energy, if you want to call it that.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And not that you can't donate or whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff about this in the book too. But basically the thesis is there are certain points in your life. The example I think he uses is like skiing. A lot of people are like, well, when I retire, I'll do all this stuff. If you're 60, 70, do you think you're going to be like skiing the slopes of, whatever treacherous mountain that you might want to do when you're younger? Yeah. Like there are things that are harder, if not impossible, at different stages of your life. And he encourages you to think about, where are you at in your life and what's the most value now? And the phrase that he uses that I love, that I've actually worked into the pillars exercise, it is now a pillar, is memory dividends. So we think about money dividends.
Mm.
He talks about memory dividends. So if you make a memory, like my wife and I did on our trip, I have them on my little Google screen here on my desk all the time, and I'm seeing those periodically. That is harvesting more of those, the benefits of taking a trip. It's not just the trip, it's the memories that you have and the stories you tell and how it impacts your life. And the sooner you can have those, now it's not saying do everything now, but think about this. And the sooner you can have those, the longer you have to reap the rewards of the thing you're doing. And then finally, just to bring it back to kids, another thing that he talks about that I always think about and other people talk about too, but my oldest is 8 years old. She's basically halfway out of the house from a practical perspective. Even if she stays longer, it's like, well, she's going to have her own life at an ever increasing rate where she's going to want to hang out with her friends and not her dad. And like that puts it into really stark contrast of, oh, like time is limited and time changes. Like I don't have forever to do things. So when do I want to do it? Let's be intentional about it, to bring it back to that theme.
Yeah. I mean, I love it because on the one hand, there's this big, again, meaning of life, like life is short platitudes and it's so obvious and like, yeah, but, you know, this is my life and so on. On the other hand, I really like the whole Ramit Sethi and the money conversation. What is the number? Because there's a sense of enoughness, right? I mean, I go crazy with the whole Elon Musk, I'm going to be a multi-trillionaire, whatever. Like, okay, good for you.
Yes.
Right? And then, you know, there's a lot on podcasts that we're listening to now going down a bit doom and gloom, but okay, the rich are getting richer, and with AI, you know, the inequality is just as massive. Are we going down this place? I mean, another rabbit hole, also not the scope of this podcast. I am not Stephen Bartlett. I'm not going to do the crazy predictions of the future. However, I mean, just sitting down, and money is such a loaded concept, especially in the family. So just having those conversations and knowing, and maybe you'll find out, now is not the time to do the round the world trip. That's not the season right now because we just bought this house. We've got whatever it is. Someone's not well. We need to pay XYZ. Or maybe actually, maybe I don't need as much as I thought, and maybe it is possible. And it's sort of bringing, for me, that's the heart of the work I do too. Bringing the beautiful life is short. You want to spend time with your children now that they're young. You want to do your bucket list things. You want to travel and see the world and experience and be fulfilled. And you want that to be commercially viable in terms of your business, sensible from a financial perspective, not just go, that's fake freedom, right? Going, I can just do whatever I want. No, you can for a few months, maybe if you're lucky, but you know, there's a point where you can't do that. So I really love bringing this kind of quite dreamy, idealistic scenario into the real world by going, okay, well, let's sit down and talk about, okay, right now I'm a 3 out of 10 in terms of money. What do I need to do? What's that number? What are the levers we can pull? What are the dials that we can turn? And that's so much more empowering and being intentional than just head in the sand. Either I've got to stick in this horrible job that I hate, or keep doing this business that isn't working so well, or whatever it is, right? You just sort of keep going and hoping for the best, I think. So hopefully a bit of a wake-up call, but also a promise of that actually there could be another way of doing it if we bring some more intentionality and a different way of thinking about things.
Yeah, 100%. Can I add something to that?
Of course.
Because the thing that came to mind was twofold. One was planning, and then the other just escaped me. Maybe it'll come back. But let's talk about planning real quick. I love planning, but I don't love, so let's take a quintessential trip. A lot of people are like, well, I want to be spontaneous. And I said, great. Plan that time where you can be spontaneous and do whatever comes to mind. But then plan those other things that you can't be spontaneous. There's probably things, if you go on a trip somewhere, that you need to book ahead of time. So you need to think about what you want to do, plan that. And then what I love about this, and I call this, just to step back from that for a second, I call this, I don't have like a fancy name for it, but I think about it in terms of like going to eat with your friends to a restaurant. And we've all probably been here, and you say, let's go out to eat. And like, great, I'm easy, let's go. And it's like, okay, well, how about Mexican food? And they're like, I had Mexican food last week. It's like, okay, well, how about Indian food? I'm not really feeling like Indian food. And that's annoying in its own way, but that's not really my point. My point is you're giving them something concrete to make decisions against and to bounce against. And that's what plans are for me. You're putting your stake in the ground, not because you are cementing it in and you're never going to move it, but you're making a concrete plan that you can plan around, and then base different decisions off of. Because then if you're on a trip and you're like, well, we have this planned, and I'd like to do this day, it's not necessarily locked in, and this on this day, I have a general idea of that I can do all the things I want to do. But then, I met this family and they invited us to dinner or whatever. And great, let's do that. Okay, but let's see. I'd rather do that instead of this one. Great, it's easy. It makes everything easier instead of trying to constantly reconfigure everything in your mind. So that's why I like plans, having a number that you can measure things against and make decisions against. Have a decision that you've made. or rather having a decision that you made doesn't mean it needs to stick forever. You can always remake that decision, but having one makes it, turns it into a tool that you can use to make even better decisions as you get closer.
Well, there's a couple of concepts that come to mind. One is the idea that creativity comes from constraints, right? If you're just like, oh, I can do anything I want anywhere with anyone. That was sort of me flying way too free. I had no relationship, like no children, no home, no job. And you're like, whoa, I can do anything. And then suddenly, you can't do anything. And that's the paradox of choice. It's too much.
Yes.
So actually giving yourself, okay, we're going to do a trip in this month, or like it's going to be a hot trip or a adventure. You just have to give yourself some kind of parameters, don't you? And suddenly, whoa, okay, now I can filter, and now you can make far more concrete decisions rather than like, oh, we could do anything, and sadly end up not doing anything because it's just business as usual. Life goes on, and the whole year's gone, and it's like, oops, we forgot about that idea we had.
100%. Yeah.
Jake, I feel like we could talk about so many different things. I'm conscious that I haven't really asked you what it is you do. So I know you said you've done a few pivots. So do you want to share with the listeners what is the current iteration, I guess, of your business? What is the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So, I'll just tell a brief story and then I'll get into what I did. So I mentioned I started my one-liner used to be helping millennial parents live regret-free. That's what I wanted to do when I first quit. And I started down that path. I had some early success. And along the way, somebody knew my background. So what I did in corporate was I was a design thinking strategist, which I talked briefly about design thinking again, but you can look it up if you don't have any clue what that is. But it's basically sticky note exercises, to be way overly simplistic about it. But I was teaching people in my big Fortune 200 company how to run workshops, how to design workshops, how to like move a project forward using these principles, if you will. And somebody knew my background after I'd quit along the way. And they said, Jake, I'm freaking out. I have a coaching. I decided to do an in-person coaching event and I just committed to it. I jumped in, but I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? And so that kind of brought me back to my sort of corporate roots. And I said, I really like doing this. I really miss this. And I think I'm going to pivot to doing that. So that was my pivot about a year and a half ago-ish at this point as it's recording. And so now what I do is I build 5-star workshops for established experts. So usually somebody who has a lot of expertise and they want to do a group coaching program or a workshop or some structured transformation, if you will. Like I actually help them get clarity first, and then I will build most of the things, obviously, alongside their knowledge, because I don't necessarily have all their knowledge directly, but I help shape that into a world-class experience for their clients that they love and that they also enjoy delivering and that they're proud of. So that's kind of what I do now in a nutshell.
I love that, and it's quite reflective of a journey that I see again and again, which is often, not to trivialize that first phase, but we all come out and we've gone through this incredible, I'm going to live regret-free and fulfilled life, and a lot of coaches come out and go, I'm going to coach other people, and it's all, I'm just going to, and it's all very kind of fluffy, nice language. Also because we're kind of rebelling by definition against the corporate. So we draw a line through the very skills that make you so commercially strong and an expert, right? So then there's a process I think we kind of go through organically, and it's hard to skip that phase when we go, somebody goes, hang on a second, Jake, you can do these amazing things that I can't do at all. And then we land on a far more commercially viable proposition. So I think it's reassuring for people to hear that, that's a very common, and it's not to say that the first idea was wrong, that was working, but you can land on something drawing more on your background while also bringing in new insights and things that you've learned along the way. So that's a great example of that happening the last few years for you.
Yes, 100%. And I'll share another thing from Jim Collins that I read a few months ago, a different one of his books called Great by Choice. He talks about bullets before cannonballs. And side note, if anyone's an entrepreneur listening out there who hasn't read some of Jim Collins' stuff, it's really good. I haven't read his more classic books in a while, but this one hit me really square in like the entrepreneurship mindset. Like I was really surprised. I'm like, I don't know if I really want to read this one. It kind of came up on my list. How I pick books is a whole podcast in and of itself. So I'll just kind of dangle that. If someone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to share my convoluted system there. But the book was really great for like entrepreneurs. Highly recommend it. But the concept was, it's really just kind of experimentation is kind of another way to do it. But I love this metaphor. So imagine you're on like an old timey ship.
Cannonballs.
Yeah. So imagine you're like an old timey ship, like the movie Master and Commander or something like that, or Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever. And you only have enough gunpowder to shoot like 1.5 cannonballs. So you only have one shot at the cannonball to sink the other ship. So are you going to chance it and hope that you hit that ship, that's pretty hard to do. So if you fire a few bullets instead until you know that you're aimed properly at that ship and then sight it along that line, that's like a really apt metaphor for how I actually approach my business. Like, let me just jump in. I didn't like take out a huge business loan or something like that. I'm trying these things out. I'm experimenting. And the whole concept that he teaches is it's low risk. It gives you a lot of information and then allows you to make a better decision, basically. But it's also tied in with like a bias towards action, if you've ever heard that phrase in these kind of concepts. And so anyway, that was my approach. And that's my advice to anybody listening. If you're curious about something, how can you go test this idea that you have? Like, maybe I want to go do my own thing, or maybe I want to pivot in my business. Like, that's basically what that was. My friend who reached out basically asked me to fire a bullet. I just did it for free. I just like had all these notes. I'm like, oh, I really missed this. It was like no risk. I wasn't committing to doing that. I just was helping her out. And I realized maybe I should go all in. And then I did a few more bullets. And I said, you know what? I'm pivoting and I'm dropping that old part of my business. I'm going to go all in on this. And so I think that's a really good way to work and to think about it in terms of, you don't have to be all in. Find a way to dip your toe in.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like I've been doing lots of free workshops locally in person, and it feels like, oh God, I can't believe I do it for free, and I don't have time for that. But actually, slowing down to speed up and getting to know the local community, maybe obviously giving value, but also in the meantime, you're refining your messaging, you're meeting connections you don't know. That someone's going to go, oh wow, this is exactly what we need, and bring something that you couldn't even have thought of. The bullets and cannibals feels like a more sophisticated sort of evolution of Gary Vaynerchuk. I think talks about ready, fire, aim, right? We'll just fire again. But you can't like aim and then get the perfect. I think, again, coming from these scripts of being a good girl at school and like getting the top grades and we don't fail. I'm going to launch this program, I'm going to make it perfect, and maybe now spend months and months with AI crafting something, designing, and then launch it, and then nobody wants it, right? Rather than like a survey here, do a free workshop there, a little low paid thing there, like see, okay, and if there's no, that's okay. Next time we try a different, different messages on LinkedIn, different party, whatever it is, right? And it's exhausting, but also exciting, and it's alive, and it's making it actually work, right? So I think we often think in those binary terms, either it's a failure or a success, but the messy reality of business is that it's much more a few steps back to then launch forwards. And as you said, it's sort of a free thing here, and then actually, and then you kind of build the thing as you're going across it, I guess, right?
Yeah, 100%. Do we have time for me to dive into that just a little bit?
Go on, one more, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is huge in many of the clients I work with. So many people tell me, they're like, oh, I wish I had talked to you before. Because what I tell them is, let's get I call it the foundation. Let's figure out the foundation of your workshop or your group program before you actually build it. You're going to understand what you think you're trying to do for your clients. So you have, your promise figured out, like, here's why they would care about it. And that's kind of the hook. So for example, maybe it's, I'm going to help your software team ship faster, so you become an elite team, or whatever, something like that. You go sell your program first, or you go get people to sign up for your workshop before you design anything, before you design any slides. Don't build any slides. You have like a really rough idea. I call that the 10%. Before you actually build anything, make sure somebody wants it. So many people spend those months that you're describing, even with AI or whatever. It's a lot of work, and then nobody wants it. And it's not wasted per se. There's still some value there, but you don't need to go down that path. You can build a great program that's even kind of rickety comes to mind, but that's not really the connotation.
It's the MVP, isn't it? It's sort of just something. It doesn't have to have the fancy, like perfectly designed cards and software and automations and stuff, right? It's like, what's the result they want? How can we get them there? Amazing. They'll rave about it. Then we can get fancy later on, right? It's just that, like, what are the post-its you're going to go to get to where you want to be? Yes,
exactly. And this will be my last comment, and then this will be a good like bow. So I've been doing some work about like what my premise is, if you will, like what is like one of my big things I believe in, and it's, instead of perfectionism, think about excellence. And the difference is that perfectionism assumes that there's a point that it's like you're done and it's perfect and you don't need to change anything. Except being, what did I just say? Exceptional?
Excellence, he said.
Excellence. Thank you. This is brand new. This is brand new for me in the last couple of weeks. So it's a little bit rusty.
We're getting a glimpse into you've got your brain on speakerphone.
Brain on speakerphone. Exactly. So anyway, but that is the pursuit of continuing to make it better because you care. And so that is, I think, is the difference. And you can start somewhere and continue making it better versus thinking that you need to reach some certain point, but you'll never reach that point anyway. And so that's why I like thinking about it in that terms. Don't think about perfectionism. Instead, think about being exceptional and excellence. So that's kind of my
perfectionism, I think, is such a form of procrastination, right? And it's sort of, okay, I'm going to make this book perfect. Oh, it's not perfect, so I'm going to start on another book and make that better. And it's just shiny object. And, there's so many reasons that you just don't release it to the world at all. It's never going to be perfect. So it's you're just chasing your tail. What I love about that excellence is giving us permission to still have very high standards and to keep evolving and improving. But as a lot of people say, maybe my 80% is someone else's 100, not to criticize someone else's, but actually your extra 20, 30 people, how much does that actually give? And especially if you're not even releasing it to the world because you're waiting for it to be perfect, you're not helping anybody. So many lessons again for those sort of rewriting those success scripts of it has to be perfect, I have to get it right first time, and all those things. There's a lot of unlearning we need to do. So Jake, where can we find you? What's the next step if someone's curious about the way in which you can help them, or just more about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest place to go is Workshop Y, like the word Y, WHY, workshopy.com. That's where you can get my free resources, including how you figure out what your workshop or your group program should be about. And you can get in touch with me over there too. So workshopy.com.
Amazing. What a great URL. And I realized we didn't talk about Bluey, which we wanted to talk about, but that would be another podcast conversation when we talk about how amazing Bluey is, but we'll do that.
Unicorns is my favorite, probably. I laugh every time.
Oh, anyway. Yeah. Well, there's so many favorites. I can't even. Yeah. But thank you so much, Jake. Really enjoyed the conversation. Some really interesting aspects there. We'll make sure we gather all the resources, next steps, and links for everybody. So thanks so much for sharing so generously of your time and insights.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love it if you could share it with someone who's in that in-between place right now, questioning the scripts they've been running, but not quite sure what comes next. And if you're building your own thing and want to do it with more intention, more structure, and a little less chaos, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming in the next few weeks. There's something new on the way, and I think you're going to find it useful.